deportation flight would depart regardless of how many people were on board. UK Home Secretary Priti Patel said Tuesday evening that she was disappointed that the flight had been halted and that her office was reviewing the legality of the decision. The government plans to move forward with the project, she also said. Access to the UK's asylum system must be based on need, not on the ability to pay people smugglers. The demand on the current system, the cost to the taxpayers, and the flagrant abuses are increasing, and the British public have rightly had enough, Patel said. I have always said this policy will not be easy to deliver, and I am disappointed that legal challenge and last-minute claims have meant today's flight was unable to depart, she added.
Despite the government's attempt to justify the scheme, criticisms of the plan has continued to grow. Church of England leaders on Tuesday called it an immoral policy that shames Britain in a joint letter to the Times newspaper. Rwanda is a brave country recovering from catastrophic genocide. The shame is our own because our Christian heritage should inspire us to treat asylum seekers with compassion, fairness, and justice, as we have for centuries, the letter reads. Many are desperate people fleeing unspeakable horrors. Many are Iranians, Eritreans, and Sudanese citizens. We have an asylum grant rate of at least 88%. It continued. We cannot offer asylum to everyone, but we must not outsource our ethical responsibilities or discard international law, which protects the right to claim asylum. In response, Truth told Sky News that the Rwanda flight policy was completely moral and that critics need to suggest an alternative policy that will work.
Incredibly dangerous journey. According to data from the UK Home Office, 28,526 people arrived to the United Kingdom on small boats in 2021. The vast majority of them, 23,655, were men, and nearly two-thirds came from just 4 countries: Iran 7,874, Iraq 5,414, Eritrea 2,829, and Syria 2,260. Careful Kalai said the reason the majority of refugees are male is the result of fleeing their homelands, where young men may be killed to stop them rebelling against the government or forced into the military service. It also explained the journey to Calais is incredibly dangerous and that many families will not risk their daughter's safety on a journey to Europe. The hope is the men who escape will then help them to safety. Almost all of the people who come on small boats, 98% of those who arrived in 2020, have applied for asylum. The Refugee Council said that most people arriving by small boats across the Channel are likely to be genuine refugees fleeing persecution. Statistics from the Home Office show that people arriving to the UK from Iran, 88%, Eritrea, 97%, and Syria, 98%, have generally high chances of being granted asylum. The chances are significantly smaller for Iraqi citizens. Only 48% of the decisions made in 2021 were positive. The Refugee Council said that overall, around 75% of initial asylum decisions made in the year to March 2022 were positive, and that of those who were rejected, about half were allowed asylum appeal. Most recently, the number of people coming on small boats has been increasing. The Home Office said 4,540 people arrived in the first 3 months of the year, most than 3 times higher than the same 3 months in 2021. The number of people arriving was boosted by much higher numbers of people coming from Afghanistan following the Taliban takeover last summer. The Home Office said 1,094 Afghan citizens came to the UK in the first quarter of 2022, almost as many as arrived over the entire 2021.
An average of €183,000 per flight. The UK has said it will pay Rwanda €120 million, that is $145 million, over the next 5 years to finance this program. On top of that, the UK has also promised to pay for the processing and integration costs for each relocated person, covering the cost of legal advice, case workers, translators, accommodation, food, and health care. According to a parliamentary research briefing, the British government said it expects this will be similar to asylum processing costs in the UK, which stands at around €12,000 per person. The UK has refused to disclose the cost of the flight it will charter to transport deportees to Rwanda. The Home Office said in its latest annual report it paid €8.6 million to charter 47 deportation flights carrying 883 people in 2020. While the cost of individual flights varied depending on the destination, the figures mean that on average, the Home Office spent €183,000 per flight, or €9,700 per person. Because there is no cap on the number of migrants, thousands could potentially pour into the capital, Kigali, within the first 5 years of the plan. We are doing this for the right persons ahead of the aircraft previously scheduled departure. The Rwandan government said it was standing ready to receive asylum seekers from the UK and that it will do its best to make sure the migrants are taken care of. We are asking that this program be given a chance, said Rwandan government spokeswoman Yolanda Makolo at a press conference in Kigali on Tuesday. Makolo responded to the Church of England letter's condemnation, saying, "We don't think it's immoral to offer a home to people, something we have done here for more than 30 years. Where we're coming from, we are doing this for the right reasons. We want this to be a welcoming place, and we will do our best to make sure the migrants are taken care of and that they are able to build a life here," she added. Although Rwanda is offering to help with migrant resettlement to a third country by providing travel transportation if they manage to obtain legal residence, the primary objective of the scheme is to fully integrate them into Rwandan society, said Doris Wiyaze Picard, the chief advisor to the Minister of Justice. There are legal paths to citizenship for migrant workers and for refugees provided they are eligible for citizenship, she added. The scheme will last 5 years, but Rwanda intends to turn it into a binding treaty at a later stage, said Picard.
We're just a few days away from the World Refugee Day and would expect something better. The recent action and manifesting of the British government has been described as broader-day racism, outright contravention of human rights principles that the UK is expected to uphold. As we speak, the UK government is yet insisting on insensitivity. Gabelison has a report in this regard.
Raab says Scott was wrong to block Rwanda deportation flight. A last-minute court ruling that prevented the first asylum seekers being forcibly removed to Rwanda was wrong and has strengthened the case for overhauling Britain's human rights laws, Dominic Raab has said. The Deputy Prime Minister urged the European Court of Human Rights (ECHR) to respect the limits of its mandate, though rejected calls from some Conservative MPs to cut ties with the Strasbourg-based body. Raab suggested the court had overreached by granting a temporary injunction that derailed the government's plan to relocate a plane load of migrants on Tuesday night to East Africa. He said the so-called Rule 39 interim orders invoked were not grounded in the European Convention but based on the rules and procedure, internal rules of the court. "I certainly believe they should not have a legally binding effect under UK law," Raab added. The decision had strengthened the case for an overhaul of human rights laws, he argued. Asked if the UK could simply ignore the ECHR's ruling, the Justice Secretary said, "Not under the Human Rights Act, but we will address this squarely with the Bill of Rights." He told BBC Radio 4's Today program, "We are going to stay within the convention but make sure the procedural framework is reformed." Raab vowed the government would curtail the ability of foreign offenders to claim a right to family life as a reason for being refused deportation. And we will stop and change the ability of the Strasbourg court to issue what amounts to effective injunction when they have no power grounded in the European Convention to do so. The flight to Rwanda was grounded after a series of legal challenges in the High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, and ECHR on behalf of the asylum seekers due to be sent on the one-way trip to Rwanda. The court battles mean there is uncertainty over when any further attempts to fly asylum seekers to the African country will be made. Raab said on Thursday he could not give a precise date as to when the government would try to schedule the next flight and accused the ECHR of intervening on the vaguest of grounds. Some Tory MPs, including Jonathan Gullis, a ministerial aide to the Northern Ireland Secretary, had called for Britain to cut ties with the ECHR, which was set up in 1959 to rule on individual or state applications alleging violations of the civil and political rights. Raab also defended the different treatment of Ukrainian refugees compared with those fleeing conflict in Syria. We have shown a big-hearted approach, whether it was in relation to Afghanistan, Hong Kong or Ukraine, Raab said. All the circumstances are different, not least proximity. Most refugees want to stay as close to their home as possible because they want to go back. The basic principle is we need to be able to conduct checks to check the veracity of the claim, particularly to asylum. We also need to make sure that there aren't threats to our security. One of the things that would undermine confidence in our system is if people who wish us harm are fraudulently trying to come here. Undaunted ABC News team is following the issue very closely and will continue with updates. Gab Ellison reporting for Undaunted ABC Amba News.
As we talk about the refugee crisis and the upcoming World Refugee Day, it is important for us to look at the situation of Ambazonian refugees in Nigeria.
You're right, Oni. The nation of Nigeria has been receiving the fleeing peoples of Ambazonia since 2016. Despite some of the difficulties these suffering people are facing, the Cross River State has shown some concern a couple of times, remarkably the governor.
Yes, the governor of Cross River State would say he's passionate. Now let's get to discover some aspects of this figure to better understand why he has been an exception on Ambazonian refugee relief in Nigeria. Cross River State Governor requesting for tax cuts and cries on camera for what he considers failure on his part. Ben Ayade is the governor of Cross River State, Nigeria. He has exempted some persons and organizations from paying tax in the state. But before we go further, let's ask ourselves, what is tax? Tax is a compulsory contribution to state revenue levied by the government on workers' income and business profits, or added to the cost of some goods, services, and transactions. Meanwhile, 2022 is considered a political year in Nigeria. Could this be a political tactics from the governor? So what do you think?
Onye, I can't categorically place this stand, but then Ben Ayade, the governor of Cross River State, Nigeria, said this speaking at the inauguration of an anti-tax agency headed by Emma Isong, a bishop, said it is sad that government, which does not meet the needs of the people in many areas, still collects tax from them. He said it's